What's going on, everyone? Before you start freaking out at the length of this video, give me a minute to explain a few things. This video is a bit long for sure, and that's because this isn't a review of Tekken as a fighting game, but more of an analysis of Tekken 7 in regards to the story. And after hearing that, I know what you're thinking. This is a fighting game we're talking about. Tekken's story isn't an area that gets put into the spotlight very often. But you're obviously interested in this topic too because you clicked on the video. And I'm going to do my best from this point forward to try to keep this Frankenstein's monster of a video as organized as possible. If you want my opinion on the game as a whole, I'd say that Tekken 7 is a good fighting game, and it's something that anyone can enjoy from casual players to pro players. So my next statement may sound a bit contradictory, but after playing through the story mode numerous times, I realized that Tekken 7's story is so objectively bad that it's insulting. My analysis is going to cover the entirety of the story from the genuinely enjoyable parts to the downright ludicrous, so spoilers ahead. For any of you not familiar with the series up until this point, Tekken was first released back in arcades in 1994, and then on the PlayStation console the following year. In addition to the main games in the series, there have been numerous spin-off titles and guest appearances by popular fighters from the series in a variety of games. Needless to say, Tekken's been a popular and lucrative franchise for sure, and it's innovated and taken huge risks with both gameplay and roster changes, starting with Tekken 3, where numerous characters were either killed off or replaced. And then moving to Tekken 4, Namco decided to innovate again and tried to address major criticisms of the previous titles. But Tekken 4 ended up a black mark on the franchise, and slowly over time, Tekken's morphed into what we have today with Tekken 7. Whether you believe Tekken 7 represents a true Tekken game or something just for casuals, the undeniable fact is that Tekken 7 is one of the most popular titles in the franchise. I've been playing this game for a few years now, and I can firmly say that the story is bad. Like, really bad. And the general consensus is that fighting games have always had bad stories. And fighting games are a niche area of gaming for sure, where the competitive aspect always comes first. But that doesn't mean that story isn't important. I've heard a lot of criticisms levied that story doesn't matter at all in fighting games. I disagree with that notion completely, and my hope is to give you guys the tools to think differently as well through this analysis. Fighting games have the potential to have some of the most complex characters imagined, but in a genre where storytelling isn't the main focus, this is a monumental task that many developers aren't willing to dedicate time to unless we start to say otherwise. The current trend has been to copy the NetherRealm Studios formula of having a movie play where you fight in a couple of spots. This has led many YouTubers uploading just the story parts, and then fans just watch those particular parts and they skip playing the game altogether. And while the movie with fights formula may not be the best as far as innovation goes, it's what we have now. And I think that if a movie like Rocky, and please forgive my oversimplification of the plot, which is about boxing and fighting Apollo Creed, can have such a timeless and unforgettable character, then this formula should start to be applied to fighting games and their movie-like storytelling as well. Unfortunately, players have just accepted the status quo, and it doesn't have to be this way, which is why shining a light on the most popular Tekken to date is so important. Now, Tekken 7 doesn't just take a step in the wrong direction story-wise, it falls right off the cliff, no pun intended. The reason I'm singling out Tekken 7's story when so many other Tekken games have had stories just as bad is that for many gamers, this is their introduction to the series, and also because the writers of this game, whom I have yet to identify, wrote in so many unnecessary plot elements into the story that frankly, I worry that they either didn't care, or maybe they cared and had no time, or had bosses that didn't care and wanted the product out the door as soon as possible. I don't know much in regards to how the games industry works, but story always seems to come last alongside sound design. Let me preface by saying that my purpose isn't to trash Tekken, Tekken 7, or the writers, but I can't help but shake this nagging feeling that sections of the story were just assigned to random staff members, and then all of these sections were smashed together without any regard to cohesion or coherence. So, Tekken 7 opens up with a rather good setup. In my writing lessons that I teach my classes, I refer to this as the exposition. We're introduced to a reporter who's been doing an investigation into the Mishima family history. He starts with a comparison to his family, which we can describe as pretty normal, and the reporter comments that his son wrote him a cute letter. I have kids, and this is very easy for me to relate to. The reporter then presents to the audience the first letter that Kazuya ever wrote to his father.
Father, one day, I will tear you to pieces.
As a Tekken nerd, I'm totally buying into this. This setup works on multiple levels in that it gives the reporter credibility in his ability to dig deep into the story for us. And as the audience, we immediately buy into the idea that this is our narrator and he's our vehicle into this world. Remember that this game may be the first Tekken someone has ever played, and this setup gives us a window into the relationship between Kazuya and Heihachi, the catalysts and cornerstones of the entire Tekken story. And then finally, this scene sets up how the rest of the story should play out. We then flash back to one of the most important moments in Tekken history. This is both brutal and enlightening at the same time. We play as 5-year-old Kazuya. The manual for Tekken 1 says as such, as we watch him attempt to fight his father. Prior to this game, this was only ever shown in the Tekken anime, which, if you're as old as me, you rented from Blockbuster, alongside Fatal Fury the motion picture, but I digress. This version of events kind of gives us a major clue into what's really happening here. Kazuya is fighting Heihachi for killing his mother, Kazumi Mishima. And as a side note for newer players, Kazumi has been a thing since Tekken 2, but almost nothing has ever been said about her prior to this game. So as players, and as the audience of this story, we know a little bit more about what's going on. Heihachi killed her. This should be firing up all sorts of questions in the audience. Why did Heihachi do that? What happened? Why is Heihachi doing this right now? Even the intro to the game itself gives us some questions in an attempt to let us know that these questions will be answered later. I couldn't ask for a better setup. So after playing Kazuya and trying to defeat Heihachi, you get laid out. The brilliance in this section is twofold, in that you get to play as 5-year-old Kazuya, complete with his Tekken 1 and Tekken 2 movesets, and more importantly, this scene has heavy emphasis on what's not being said. Look at how slowly Heihachi's walking with Kazuya towards the edge of the cliff. He's not grabbing him by his head, or dragging him on the ground, or even running to the edge of the cliff. He's carrying him rather gently, despite the fact that he brutally stomped him out. He doesn't want to do this. We're establishing character here. Heihachi's a tough man, and he treats martial arts and fighting with utter seriousness. But Kazuya is still his son, and he knows what he's doing is wrong. We as the players are then the ones that have to push the buttons to toss Kazuya over the cliff, almost as if Heihachi has no choice. It's pretty messed up when you think about it. But nothing more needs to be said, and again, this is a solid intro to the story, which gave me hope. Unfortunately, this is where the story appears to have switched writers, and it's as if you get invited for refreshments.
Have some coffee and cake.
And then you immediately know something's not right.
Have some!
We then move forward in time to the present. We see Jin, who's in reality pretty inconsequential to the entire narrative of Tekken 7, and he's written out just as quickly. I won't harp on this too much, and Namco really needs to flesh out the beef between Kazuya and Jin in Tekken 8 because honestly, they don't have any real reason to hate each other.
Where's the beef?
But after we establish that Jin's wandering the desert in his best alternate costume, the story then switches focus again to Nina, of all characters, who goes on to tell us the plot of Tekken 6, where Jin started World War III. Why isn't that reporter from the beginning of the game telling us this? More on that later. Now, I'm not entirely willing to suspend my disbelief and push the fact that 2 Japanese companies have basically started World War III to the back of my brain. Suspension of disbelief is a fickle thing, and I have to acknowledge the fact that Jin starting a war is a pretty big deal. And I can't get over the fact that not only the Mishima Zaibatsu, but that G Corporation were allowed this sort of power and influence. The premise is so beyond stupid because the United Nations is a thing in this game. There are countries with functioning governments, militaries, and alliances, and World War II has happened. So again, this stands out in a world where people can literally access the power of the devil.
Yes, Satan?
Bears can run companies, and hair like this defies the laws of physics. The fix here is so simple that it basically writes itself. Just give us a line that says Jin helped to influence countries by maybe tricking governments and their citizens into open conflict, and then have the Mishima Zaibatsu, an arms dealer, profit from the war.
They have weapons, you have weapons, everyone has weapons, but right now, no one has a clear advantage.
Then Jin can still fight that Skeksis looking thing, Azazel from Tekken 6. Bam, one problem solved. Alright? So you remember how I said that Nina was the one giving us this plot exposition? That needs to be fixed immediately. Here's why this is a problem. 1, the narrative is already bouncing around between what happened and what is happening. If you're trying to be Francis Ford Coppola writing The Godfather 2, great. But when you're writing for a video game where you're going to have some newer players, you need to keep it simple. Tekken 7's writers set up a credible narrator with this reporter, and you need to stick with him in the premise instead of bouncing the story around from recapping pre-Tekken 1 to then Tekken 6 to showing us Jin is missing, and then Heihachi returning to power, all from the point of view of Nina. Oh, wait, excuse me. It switches to Heihachi's point of view for a bit. You see what I'm talking about here? Who's telling this story? Alright, so how do you fix this problem? Easy. None of this needs to happen in present time. The entire story should have already happened, and the audience is getting all of this information through the lens of the reporter. The writers have established that this reporter is an expert, so the audience is more than willing to buy into the fact that he could have obtained all this crazy information. Even more frustrating is the fact that the reporter eventually talks directly to Heihachi. Namco set it up, but then they dropped the ball.
Everybody says that about me.
I've got such a problem with this because it creates so much confusion for the audience so early on in the story. Then, to make matters worse, the story again switches back to the reporter, who goes on to tell us that his family was killed and his hometown was destroyed. And while character development should never be a problem, the purpose of this reporter is to be our storyteller. During the game, his face is always hidden,
Don't want nobody peeking.
which indicates that he's supposed to be us. Then the writers go about giving him a story which defeats the purpose of hiding his face. If he's us, he doesn't need a story. Looking at you, Ethan Winters. Getting back to my point, the reporter shouldn't be an active participant in the story. We want answers to those questions we were asking earlier. But instead, we're getting answers to questions we didn't ask, nor do we care about. Then the story makes like Quantum Leap and changes back to Nina and Heihachi. Jeez. Heihachi decides to hold another Tekken tournament because... fighting game?
You want more fight?
The logic here is almost non-existent. Nina straight up asks him, why even bother doing this?
Why on earth would you want to hold a tournament now, like this?
And Heihachi says he'll explain later. Surprise! The tournament gets cancelled after he gets his goose cooked by Akuma later.
今すぐ全世界にわしが死んだという情報を流せ
And forgive the English teacher in me, but one of the largest problems with this story is best exemplified by the traumatic principle of Chekhov's gun. The principle basically goes like this. Remove everything that has no relevance to the story. If you say in the first chapter that there's a rifle hanging on the wall, well, in the second or third chapter, it needs to go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there. If you apply that principle to Tekken 7, don't mention the Tekken tournament if it's not going to happen. Throw the concept in the trash. And as if you weren't tired of it already, we switch back to the reporter. He goes on to reiterate what we already know, in that Heihachi has showed up, and the King of Iron Fist tournament has been announced.
No. Duh. Where'd you park the squad car, Dick Tracy? Come on.
He then goes on to tell us that he doesn't care, and we're starting not to either, because the journalist is redundant at this point. I mean, he sounds bored. Then, just when you thought Namco's writers couldn't have lowered the bar anymore, they're outside digging a hole. I mean, the reporter goes on to tell us that the G Corporation and the Mishima Zaibatsu are at war with each other, but the G Corporation has public opinion on their side. I mean, dude, seriously? I mean, the public opinion in this game shifts just as much as the narrators do. And most of this was already explained. I mean, this isn't even a hard fix at all. Just pick a narrator and a point of view. You could remove most of this scene up until we get the flashback to the Tekken 5 intro. But, nope. The reporter just kind of sits around waiting for stuff to drop into his lap. And as if he read the script, a random fellow reporter shows up and drops something right into his lap. Narrator must be psychic.
Call me now for your free tarot reading.
Anyway, we play the intro to Tekken 5, which is cool, but it offers us very little in the way of plot, motive, or consequence outside of the fact that G-Corp betrayed Kazuya. Okay, so apparently Namco just wants you to
Punch the keys, for God's sake!
and the story will move on. Again, this is cool, but ultimately pointless. Something should have been added to show that maybe Heihachi's enjoying spending this time ripping up the jackbots to pieces with his son. Maybe some dialogue during the fights when you're using the power moves. I mean, the lines of dialogue are already there.
Yeah.
This would have added to the narrative that something's up with Heihachi. and would have had us asking more questions that we would want answered. Why did Heihachi agree to fight alongside Kazuya? Why did he enjoy it? And why was he so surprised at Kazuya's deception? All wasted potential.
You're the man now, dog.
Then our reporter eventually finds the Tekken wiki online because he doesn't tell us anything we didn't already learn from the Tekken 5 recap portion of the game. Back in the land of present-day Tekken 7, Heihachi and Nina are on the Spruce Moose from somewhere to Italy.
Hop in! But sir, I said hop in.
To find the Sirius XM radio marksmen. Who are these people? Well, they're exorcists, which gave me a ray of hope as to where this story might be going, until it falls flat on its face within 4 seconds of their introduction. Heihachi plans to use them to get public opinion on his side. Hold on a second here. You have two characters that can use the power of the devil.
Yes, Satan?
And you have a group of literal exorcists. And what do exorcists do, class?
That the power of Christ compels you!
Seriously? I mean, the writers established the fact that exorcists are a thing in this universe, and then they use them as Heihachi's public relations office. I mean, I thought for sure that Claudio, the world's most powerful exorcist, would
Exorcise the demons!
or we would learn something new, but no. And also, hilariously, Heihachi tells Nina that the tournament is where he plans to expose Kazuya. Heihachi can literally just show up on your television, but he needs a tournament to expose Kazuya? Again, ditch the tournament. So, after some actually useful information from the reporter, and him telling us he wants to kill Jin now,
I took the opportunity to quietly pocket a screwdriver.
we quickly switch to Jin's point of view, where he remembers being unconscious and zapping Wesley Snipes into a female.
Stop eating my sesame cake!
Then to being in the Middle East, and then Laura shows up, and Jin, as I said before, is basically written out of the game because coma. Again, the problem can be solved by having all of this happen in the past, and with the pointless reporter as our narrator, or just removing it altogether, because Jin has no real bearing on the plot of this story. Then Nina is like, hey everyone, Lars is here. Remember him? Nina says that they have to stay one step ahead, which basically means the writers couldn't think of a better way to have Nina and the Zaibatsu figure out that Jin's with Lee and Alyssa.
Call me now for your free tarot reading.
Moving on. Okay, so back to our reporter who goes on to tell us some information about Kazumi, which again, it started to ignite some interest. And then we switch to Kazuya, who tells some dude in riot gear to hasten the preparations. What preparations, man? I mean, to send more jackpots to get Heihachi? I mean, Kazuya and Heihachi have all these plans, but they never say what they are. And they never amount to much of anything anyways. The story then switches back to Lee, meeting up with the reporter, and then apparently seducing him to come back to his place or something. Again, the plot just keeps jumping. I mean, why aren't each of these scenes being introduced by the reporter? Instead, we have two separate stories going on. One of them we care about, and the other one we couldn't care less about. And the one we care about is so completely vague that it's numbing our brains. To make matters even worse, there are a bunch of scenes with Alyssa and Lee mixed in with scenes of the reporter talking to Lee. So when did these scenes happen? I mean, did Lee run upstairs to talk to the reporter, then run downstairs to talk to Alyssa? Then some fights happen, and they have a happy time remembering Lars. After looking into Zafina's crystal ball, the Tekken Force shows up multiple times to get beaten up and have their lunch money taken. So after the Tekken Force gets clobbered, Heihachi gets mad and then says, no second chances. Nina then goes ahead and says, prepare the SWAT team. Wait a minute, SWAT team? I mean, the Tekken Force has a special law enforcement unit that uses military weapons and tactics? I mean, who the hell did they send before? The B team? I mean, good God. So Nina and the SWAT team show up, and then they still fail to get Jin back. I mean, why does Heihachi even want Jin? I mean, it's never explained, and it's dropped just as fast as it's introduced. Chekhov's gun, people. Then Lee, Jin, Alyssa, Lars, and Nina just exit the story at this point and watch Volcano Channel later. I mean, I'm skipping ahead with these sections because they're simply there to pad out the game time. I mean, the solution is to remove this stuff. Jin gets carted off to show up in Tekken 8. Great, got it. I mean, why bother at all? Just say he's missing, he can't be found, and move on. You can still do that thing where he shows up after the end credits as a teaser for Tekken 8. So Heihachi's just now meditating in the Mishima Dojo. We don't know how he got here, and frankly, we really don't care at this point. Then Akuma just shows up, and he apparently wields the power to open doors without touching them. Akuma's another major thread that just kind of floats loose here. I mean, using a character as powerful and as renowned as Akuma is, the writers really needed to utilize him for more than just fight, raging demon. I mean, it's comical at this point.
And they're going to burn for it. Burn!
So apparently Kazumi asked Akuma to kill not only Heihachi, but also Kazuya if she failed to do it. And that's it, folks. They made a verbal contract. That's the whole reason he's here. So Akuma, why didn't you do this sooner? Heihachi straight up asks him this question, and Akuma gives him some BS answer about he was waiting for Heihachi to get stronger. Dude, what? I mean, Akuma tells Kazuya later that he's not going to rest until he's killed him. Dude, it took you 44 years to even attempt to complete that verbal contract with Kazumi. And now that what Kazumi has said was going to happen has happened, the world's all jacked up anyway. Even if Akuma kills them both now, he's failed to fulfill his end of the contract.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal.
Because killing Heihachi and Kazuya isn't going to make any difference. I mean, the world isn't just going to magically repair itself because Heihachi and Kazuya are dead.
So you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
And another thing, Heihachi is apparently going to become a threat to the world. This falls just shy of making any sense at all because Heihachi didn't start World War III. Jin and Kazuya were the ones who did that. So other than taking back the Zaibatsu, what has Heihachi done that would give him the title of world-ending threat? I mean, he's barely even involved with Tekken 5 or 6 canonically, and I don't buy him wanting to take over the world because he was in control of the Zaibatsu in Tekken 1, 3, and 4, and he literally did nothing with it. So again, why is he such a threat? I'm not even sure how to begin to fix all of this nonsense. So y'all remember Devil, right? He's that character that was turned into a gene or something stupid and convoluted. First, have Kazuya be the original target for Kazumi under the influence of Devil instead of Heihachi. And then let's try this. Instead of trying to kill Kazuya, have Devil want a stronger host. And in order to possess this new host, perhaps Devil needs to weaken a person's will by bringing them closer to death or something like that. I mean, the groundwork is already set up for that. Devil shows up with Kazuya after Kazuya's fall. Devil gets to Jin after he's shot multiple times. Have Heihachi catch Kazumi trying to hurt Kazuya. Maybe have her try to drown him or something really awful. Heihachi then has to kill Kazumi to protect his son, with him not fully realizing that Kazumi was possessed by Devil until it's too late. He then also learns that after killing Kazumi, he's made a terrible mistake in setting Devil free to inhabit another body. That body being Kazuya. Okay, so then what about throwing Kazuya off the cliff? Well, before her death, maybe we can have Devil as Kazumi plant a seed of doubt in Heihachi's mind about what Kazuya would have become. Heihachi doesn't believe her initially, and he's still human and vulnerable, so he eventually doubts himself when he starts to notice that the power Kazuya wields. You know that charge up 10-hit thing in the intro? You can add a little bit more weight to that than just having Kazuya do it again as an old man and then having Heihachi unable to block it. Anyway, have Heihachi worry that Devil's already possessed Kazuya, when in reality we know as the audience that Kazuya is a Super Saiyan or something. Then you can cue up the disgusting attitude towards Kazuya in the scene, because he thinks that Kazuya is actually Devil. You can still have the cliff toss, and then of course Heihachi's eventual regret at killing his wife and throwing his innocent son over the cliff, because in the process of trying to stop Devil from coming to power through his son, he inadvertently causes it to happen. And with all of that in mind, Heihachi, in an act of compassion, would never tell Kazuya the truth about what happened with his mother, and in essence, he protects his wife's legacy because that's what he would do for the woman he loved. Heihachi clearly cares about his wife, even going as far as to shed a tear not once, but twice, and then also displaying her tiger on his karate gi. So this wouldn't be stretching the character motivations any further than usual. Hell, he could have taken in Jin out of guilt for what happened to Kazuya. Then he sees that Jin is wielding the same power of Devil, and he makes another mistake with shooting Jin in the face after he's freaked out by Jin destroying True Ogre with martial arts. And then of course you can still have Devil being partially reborn with half of him in Jin and the other half in Kazuya. My point is that Heihachi should be a tragic villain, as should Kazuya. I mean, being evil for the sake of being evil isn't exactly entertaining or the hallmark of good character development. So then what about Akuma? Well, he's basically a demon at this point anyway, so why wouldn't Devil have a backup plan? If Devil is stopped by Heihachi, like he was in Tekken 2, of course Devil would have Akuma go after him. And if Devil can't have Kazuya, then no one can. This way, the writers can keep Akuma as static and boring as possible, with him wanting to fight. The problem is that's not what we got. We got a lame reason for him not being in the game because Namco was able to negotiate the rights for his use. Moving on. Alright, so back to the game. Kazuya overhears from Akuma that his mother's intent was not only to just kill Heihachi, but also Kazuya himself. He laughs it off and calls it absurd, and I honestly thought that his denial of the situation would have been an excellent chance for us to see and have Namco expand on his character motivations. He's so convinced that Heihachi had no reason to kill his mother that he won't see reason. Unfortunately, Kazuya never revisits this ever again. He never questions Akuma about it, and he just kind of goes with it and then fights Akuma because they need to fight. What should have happened is that Kazuya should have become conflicted about his mother and Heihachi's motivations way back when he was 5 years old. And because of this, perhaps his control over Devil starts to wane. More on that later. And because Heihachi's, third death up until this point in the series, Kazuya can't ask him any questions, so he has no choice but to challenge Akuma to try to get those answers. And then you can still have Kazuya and Akuma fight on the rooftop. It would just have a lot more weight and motivation to it. Perhaps Akuma tells him the truth, and Kazuya doesn't want to hear that crap because that would mean that his entire life he's been wrong about his father, and that pisses him off. Because honestly, if you don't have Akuma and Kazuya fight, you know the fans are going to go all... Alright, moving on. Now, the giant Dr. Abel space laser that was introduced in Tekken 2, I'm not even going to go into where that thing came from. It's honestly a ridiculous plot device that creates a giant plot hole. Why wouldn't Heihachi just shoot Kazuya while he's sitting in his G Corporation chair with his giant gorilla hands? I mean, because he needed footage of Devil? I mean, he already had something. He showed it to Claudio earlier, so that goes right out the window. So anyway, Heihachi blows up the G Corporation building, Kazuya face lasers the satellite in retaliation, and the story moves on as if nothing happened. There are no consequences that we see or are felt by Kazuya or Heihachi. They lose some points with the public, and there are some protests. I mean, do we really honestly believe that Heihachi or Kazuya care about that at all? I mean, Heihachi's trying to kill the literal devil. And beyond that, the Akuma fight against Heihachi and the Kazuya fight against Akuma, they move the plot nowhere. We're right back to both of them sitting in chairs in their respective buildings. So why even bother having these fights? There's no plot exposition that's given beyond what we already know. And fight scenes in stories should have consequences and stakes.
Did you say steak?
Which in the world of Tekken 7 they don't. And also on a side note, if the G Corporation was blown up, where the hell is Kazuya sitting in this scene here? If that wasn't the G Corporation building, where did Heihachi blow up? I mean, okay, either way, a quick fix would be, instead, have the fight with Akuma, who's a demonic entity, and the big giant space laser. Have those things push Devil further into control of Kazuya's soul by bringing him closer to death, as I mentioned before. Again, a lot of this is going to make more sense later, but anyways, moving on. Alright, so Claudio FaceTimes Heihachi and he says, "Hey man, I put all those pro Heihachi vids up on YouTube that you wanted. I gotta go make some gabagool. Peace."
And for you, sir?
I will have the gabagool.
What?
And we never see him again. What exactly did he do? I mean, we have no idea. Heihachi could already just pop up on whatever television screen he wanted to, so Claudio just kind of stood around with his giant shoulders and tiny head, stroking his chin. I mean, instead, what could have happened is, you remember when Heihachi wanted to capture Jin? Well, how about he successfully is able to capture Jin? Then Claudio can attempt to do an exorcism on him. Then we can have this creepy scene where Heihachi sees Devil for the first time, and then maybe Claudio is unsuccessful because of some interference from Lars, Lee, and Alyssa, and then maybe Anna gets thrown in there. They all get away with Jin, leading to Heihachi to believe that the only way to rid the world of Devil is through killing both Jin and Kazuya. Bam! Set up for the end. More on that later. Alright, so back in the present-day world of Tekken 7, our reporter, who we've all just completely forgotten about at this point, we're honestly wanting to skip his scenes, he goes ahead and he's able to speak directly to the Iron Grandpa after just walking up to the Zaibatsu building. I mean, why didn't he just do that before? They tell him to go away, and he's like, yeah, okay. And then I guess Heihachi decides to change his mind because reasons? Anyway, our reporter is then able to get an interview with Heihachi, which should have been the point that the audience learned that everything that we've just seen has already happened, and the reporter is telling us everything. We should have major reveals here, but instead we get some convoluted story about Kazumi trying to kill Heihachi because she's possessed, because she has split personalities, because she always intended to kill him and this was some sort of elaborate trick. I mean, it's really not clear at all, and I've already said how all of this could have been fixed. This is simply the point in the story where the writers can't even seem to pick a lane to drive in. In fact, one of the things that this scene should have done is foreshadowed Heihachi's death. The reporter could have even theorized Heihachi's motives for speaking with him. The reporter could tell the audience that maybe Heihachi knew he wasn't going to be able to survive another fight with Kazuya using the powers of Devil, hence all the schemes with the giant Dr. Abel space laser. Then when Heihachi meditates for this last time, having come to terms with his potential death, he says, "Let's do this." How badass does that make Heihachi? Death is an inconvenient fact of life to be faced head-on by this man. Well, eventually we come to the final chapter of the Tekken 7 story. Heihachi and Kazuya apparently meet up in a volcano. How did they get there? How did they know to go there? Did they challenge each other? Did Heihachi send an email? Or did he have the Exorcists use their Sirius network to talk to him? Did he appear on Kazuya's TV? I mean, who knows? The writers don't seem to care. So a small verbal exchange happens, and hold on a second, where are those scenes from the intro video? The one where Kazuya mentions betraying his family, shooting his face laser at the Hadouken. I mean, him mentioning his mother to Heihachi, and Heihachi shedding another tear. I mean, once again, this would have been perfect here. The writers could have had Heihachi believe that he has to kill his son, who is the last person directly attached to his late wife, whom he still cares about. But no, that scene just doesn't exist here. A simple tear would have spoken volumes, but Heihachi and Kazuya fight because that's what's supposed to happen. I mean, don't get me wrong, they should fight, but there's no stakes involved. Heihachi isn't conflicted about the fight, and Kazuya doesn't even mention his mother, which is why he challenged Heihachi to fight when he was 5. Heihachi even says that everything leads back to that inciting incident. But no, it's just, it's time for you to die because the script says so. Where's the motivation? Alright, so how do we fix all of this? This isn't perfect, and even my story is Kafka-esque at this point.
Who's Kafka? Tell me!
We need one more revelation, this time about Kazuya. Remember how I mentioned that Devil should be slowly creeping back in order to take control of Kazuya? Well, from the end of Tekken 4 onward, we know that Kazuya has been in control of Devil, so we think. At the beginning of Tekken 4, we can see that one eye is red and the other eye is, I guess, brown. In literature, this would signify the struggle between Kazuya and Devil. And at the end of Tekken 4, when Kazuya gains control of Devil, both of his eyes turn brown. And then from Tekken 5 onward, we're back to the red eye being present because it's cool. So instead of the eye being just a neat character design, how about we use it for a narrative purpose? And then Heihachi, or us, we can find out that Devil has regained control of Kazuya. Instead of one red eye, both eyes are now red. And then you can slap in that Heihachi scene with the tears again. Heihachi's assumption that Kazuya was in control after Tekken 4 is completely wrong, which would give the fight more weight because it's a battle for Kazuya's soul and the potential fate of the world. Devil wants Heihachi out of the picture, and Heihachi wants revenge on Devil because of all the crap he put him through. But in order to do that, he believes he has to kill Kazuya because of Claudio's failed exorcism earlier in the story. Okay, so then you have the fight play out almost exactly as it does in the game. But at the end of the fight, after Heihachi has literally beaten Devil out of Kazuya,
just beat the devil out of it.
Heihachi sees that Kazuya is back, and knowing that he beat Devil in hand-to-hand combat and saved his son's soul, Heihachi accepts his fate at the hands of his son for his final judgment. Remember that quote at the end of the credits? He takes the final blow like a man, giving Kazuya the greatest gift that a man like Heihachi can give: a good fight and a victory in battle. Heihachi dies satisfied, but also knowing that he wasn't forgiven by Kazuya, and Kazuya then never learns the truth about what happened with his mother. Tragic irony. And in Heihachi's mind, Kazumi's legacy is safe. It's a bittersweet ending, but that's what complex characters need. Conflicting motivations and inner turmoil. The solutions to problems should never be perfect, which is what makes characters interesting. Not just fight because fists go punch and feet go kick. So, now for the final battle with Shin Akuma. I mean, Kazuya shouldn't even be using devil powers at this point if you're following my ridiculous story, and it would honestly be more badass if he's even more powerful without devil. Remember, I said earlier that Heihachi had seen this power at an early age, and that's why he thought devil had possessed him, and in reality it's Kazuya's just innate ability. You can still have the BS fight with Shin Akuma, and the writers could easily set up Kazuya to be the big bad for Tekken 8, leaving the audience to think, how the hell is Jin gonna beat Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan Kazuya? Alright, so if you made it this far, let me thank you for giving me your time. Something that you'll never get back. So I hope you appreciated the suggestions that I threw in there. Maybe you didn't. Either way, let me know. And I hope you appreciate my humor, and I hope you can forgive me cracking up as I read through some of this stuff. So again, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys with another video pretty soon.
Okay, you can go. Hit the road, as they say, and have a nice day.